Our next inductee is for coaching, and this woman has a strong connection with our first inductees as she was their coach for a number of years.
However, before we get started on her coaching career, it should be noted that she was quite a remarkable skater. In fact, she and her partner, Lawrence Demy, were the first and then four-time after that world ice dance champions. But let's back up even further.
Jean started skating at the age of 6 under duress, as her sister wanted to skate, so she was dragged along with her. Jean had to give up her involvement with horses to go to the rink. As she said herself, she never fell in love with skating, but she did like it.
As Jean described herself at the early stage as a brat spoiled by all, I quote, her first coach was Pierre Levitsky, a Czech national who soon handed over to a more senior coach. It was apparent that Jean possessed some very special abilities.
Jean continued to gain skating skills over the early years, and following the war, she returned to the ice and started ice dancing as well as single skating. Jean said, my sister, who was 17 and much more talented than I was, and myself, 14 at the time, were sent to Cheltenham Ladies College, which she said was a lost cause for her. But unfortunately, on a sadder note, that summer she lost her sister, who tragically passed away.
So Jean returned to the ice rink, and it was 5 years after the war in 1950 when countries started back with their national championships, which were generally held after the World Championships, oddly as that might seem. At the time, there were many partner breakups and skaters turning professional, so the association in Great Britain decided to be proactive and put teams together.
Jean was matched with Lawrence Demy, and it was magic. Well, at least on the ice. They won their first competition together, an unofficial world dance event, and then went on to win the first of 4 official World Ice Dance Championships.
When I asked Jean about her relationship with Lawrence off the ice, nice spirals, Jean said, I asked Jean about her relationship with Lawrence off the ice. Jean clearly said, well, I loved his father. He was a stand-up gentleman. Needless to say, although they were not the best of friends off the ice, they were efficient and effective on the ice partners. I also asked her what was one of her strengths, and she said, well, I never fell in competition unless forgetting to remove my skate guards. But there was one close call when winning the British junior paired title, which they also skated pairs, upon landing the star lift. Lawrence set her down on the other side of the boards.
Oops.
She said she clambered back on the ice with as much dignity as she could muster as my partner stood and laughed. Well, they did still win, but you could see the insight to the relationship.
Following an incredibly successful competitive ice dance career, Jean considered going into ice volleys, and she partnered with Bill Kipp while they considered their options. Jean clearly mentioned that Bill Kipp and her were soulmates. In fact, they were engaged twice.
When I interviewed Jean, you could hear the love in her voice while speaking about Bill Kipp. It was undeniable. But as Jean often mentioned in our chat, she believes very much in fate and destiny. And at least in this case, both fate and destiny were not on her side. Bill Kipp perished in the Sabina plane crash carrying the U.S. figure skating team in 1971.
As Jean transitioned into her coaching career, it is here where she said fate and destiny played a much more positive role. Being at the right place at the right time, as she put it, allowed her to work with many top competitors of the time.
She coached many elite skaters in Canada, such as Otto and Maria Jelinek, Donna Lee and John Mitchell, John and Betty McKilligan, Don Phillips and Joni Graham, and one of the last Hall of Fame inductees last year, Victor Kratz. Wow. In fact, it was last year's inductee Barry Soper who suggested Victor take lessons from Jean while he lived on Vancouver Island.
Jean worked with Victor and suggested he get a partner, which he did, Miss Taryn O'Neill, who skated out of Hollyburn Country Club. Jean worked with Joanne Sloman while they started this young team on their way. Eventually, Taryn had to retire due to injury. Shaylin Bourne became his partner, and we know the rest of that is history.
Jean always did what was right for the skater. She herself won 5 world titles, coached too many successful dance teams to mention, always has fun and positive approach to everything she does. She has contributed to skating throughout her lifetime, on and off the ice. And as she always said, I believe in fate and destiny.
Well, Jean, tonight fate and destiny meet once again to ensure that all you have done for skating in BC, around the world, will live on to be inspiring for all. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming, and forgive me, Jean, somebody who my former partner, Rob McCall, used to lovingly refer to as Jean, the jazz machine. And I swear when we went to the seminars, he had more fun skating with her than me. I'd get ditched at the side while they would do a blues or a rumba. Jean had the hips that could match Rob. Never met anybody else who I could say the same about. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming Jean Westwood into the Skate Canada BC Hall of Fame.
Am I allowed to say that, Jean, you have a great set of hips? You want to say? Okay. Okay. I'd rather you speak than move, my dear.
Can't keep up with me anyway. Thank you, everyone, very much. I wanted to say to Kevin, too, he had trouble with his boots. You wouldn't believe what I went through. I couldn't believe why I had such trouble with figures. And Dame Gladys Hogg, one of the best renowned coaches you'd ever meet, and she was tough. Believe you me, she was tough. That's where I learned toughness from her. But she kept moving the blade on my boot all the time. Didn't help. So eventually she gave up. Just free skate and do your pairs and dance, forget it. And then somebody looked later on in the year, and Stubbs and Burt, who weren't as good as Stanzioni, I guess, they'd put 2 left uppers on my soles of my boot. So it's no wonder. Can you imagine, Kevin? So you know what I went through. So I have full sympathy. But that's why the coaches now have to really go after the equipment. That's for sure.